Welcome in for the 7th straight time this season, a victorious edition of the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. The number 2 Oregon Ducks march into West Lafayette tonight and post a 35-0 victory over the Purdue Boilermakers to improve to 7-0. Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, Jordan Schultz, all here with you on a Friday evening. Fellas, it was clean, it was dominant, it was about as much as you could have wanted for a short week road game following a massive program or season-defining win. Will, what jumped out to you?
I like that you started out fast. Your first 3 drives, you go down and you get points, especially putting up those 14 points early. Like, that's a spot. This game is a spot. It's why, like, it felt like the hot pick with a lot of the national pundits was like, watch out for Purdue. Like, they're the spoiler makers for a reason.
I did hear the spoiler maker thing this week.
Which,
yeah, that was...
you might have heard it from me because I thought it was really funny the first time I heard it.
It was cheeky.
I started claiming it. I'm not going to lie. I stole it from, like, Tom Fernelli or somebody. Like, I just was like, spoiler makers? That's great. Going to say it every spot I could. But the way that you don't allow them to have that opportunity is the exact opposite of what you did against Idaho. Against Idaho, you don't score, you let them hang around, and then all of a sudden it's the third quarter, and it's like, it's a 1-touchdown game. All of a sudden they have life, and they feel like they can get back into it on a fluky play or a flea flicker or something crazy like that. What does Oregon do? They go down and they score 2 touchdowns right away. I felt like they ran the ball pretty well to start the game. Obviously, they used a bunch of different backs. They used Dylan Gabriel to run a little bit as well. And then I felt like their passing attack, you're missing Terrence Ferguson, so you're missing that safety valve. That didn't matter at all. You still keep attacking the sides. That big play on the first drive to Evan Stewart, an incredible catch. I just felt like they had a great game plan early. You get up 14, you're up by 21 at the end of the second quarter, and then that game's pretty much over.
Schultz, I know that you sometimes have you're got the pulse a little bit high on these things, but you were pretty comfortable from the jump today?
Yeah, I didn't really feel like there was anything to worry about, like maybe Purdue is going to cover, but nope, that didn't even end up happening. It started out at like a 27.5-point line, climbed up to a 30.5-point line. What I noticed, though, I like that Will talks about from the get-go, the 21-point lead that they jumped out to in the first half. Those drives were all really long. They were something, the time of possession at halftime, Oregon was killing Purdue in that. It evened out in the second half because Purdue was able to string some long drives together. But just right on, Oregon coming out and really, like 75 yards down the field, then 99 yards down the field. You don't see 99.5-yard drives very often.
Yeah.
And for a team struggling with the rush today, they were still able to establish Jordan James. He scored 2 of those first 3. And ultimately, even though Oregon couldn't do everything they wanted to on offense, they still looked really good on offense. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I liked also, in watching the broadcast after that 99-yard touchdown drive, they said, first 99-yard touchdown drive since November of last season. I'm like, oh, so it's been less than a year since they've done this. I mean,
you think 11 months.
There was another streak
so this is normal.
that something that hadn't
a lot.
happened in over 3 decades did happen tonight. We'll get to that coming up in the next segment. But I just going back to your initial thought, Will, I think that was really important, and because of the fact that there were. I get why the pundits were on it, I guess, is what I'm saying. You're coming off a huge win of your own, emotional letdown spot. Short week, first time traveling, the 2+ time zone situation. Their quarterback and play caller are new. You don't have a lot of film on them. All the makings, all the right ingredients for an upset were there, for the spoiler makers to rear their ugly heads were there. But I just like that Dan Lanning and the entire Duck squad just shut all of that down. They're just like, no. To a man, we have you personnel-wise, and it seemed like they kind of just did whatever they wanted tonight.
Right. Well, remember last year how every time we came on and they played an inferior opponent, it was almost like, hey, it's supposed to look a certain way. There's a standard that you need to play to, and it felt like they did that. This year, obviously, it kind of hasn't felt like that at times, but I think when you go back and you look at UCLA, it was like that aside from a pick 6 at the end of the second quarter.
Correct,
and
except
then
for one play.
Right. But that's a 14-point swing right there. So now all of a sudden you don't cover, and the game looks a little bit closer. The third quarter, you kind of play with your food a little bit. The Michigan State game, you let them come back and score late in that one. So it looks good early on. Oh, but by the way, you also have Dylan Gabriel with 2 red zone interceptions in that one. Yes, Gabriel had an interception in this one, but I felt like it was him trying to push the ball down the field. It was late in the second quarter. It wasn't in the red zone necessarily, right? Like you hadn't had a drive into the red zone where he throws the interception. And it doesn't come back to bite you, so maybe that's why it doesn't feel as maybe important, I guess is the wrong word there, but it's not as impactful. You don't remember it. It felt like for the first time it looked a certain way. You go down the list, Jordan James, he had 10 carries, but he had 50 yards. So that means he's averaging 5 a clip. Like, that's pretty good. Now you're able to get Whittington a lot of touches, an incredible touchdown catch by Noah Whittington.
And we'll talk more about him coming up later, but yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable. It looked like those old 2002 Madden games where you throw it and your wide receiver doesn't turn, but it goes through his back and he catches it and you're like, I don't know how I did that, but that was awesome.
But the pirouette with the vice grip hands was very impressive.
Right. It was just an all-around good game. Tez Johnson looks good. Evan Stewart, yes, he only has 4 catches, but he's got 96 yards, and he has a big one that's almost for 50. Like, you just start going down the list defensively. Your defensive line got after the quarterback. You have multiple sacks. You have multiple tackles for loss. You have it from multiple different players. It's not just one guy that's getting it done. Your linebackers, Bossa and Betcher, did a great job on Purdue's running quarterback, Brown. Last week, the reason Purdue was able to get back in the game against Illinois is they didn't have a middle linebacker that could spy Brown and stay with Brown. So they either had to rush the edges, and then Brown was able to find an open wide receiver, or they had to try and spy, and Brown would outrun him. Guess what? You can't do that with this Oregon team, at least not with a quarterback like Brown. So it just felt like all the little things that everyone nationally looked and said, well, Oregon likes to play with their food. You didn't play with their food. Nope. Well, you got a running quarterback. That can be hard to stop. Your linebackers are faster than all the other linebackers in the country, or most of them at least. And so you're able to stop him there. Well, maybe the defense doesn't come out because you don't have Jordan Birch. They were clicking on all cylinders. Mateo Uiagalelei continues to take massive steps forward. That kid is unbelievable. And then offensively, your offensive line looks great. Yeah, you give up a sack, but sometimes that happens, and you run the ball well, and you throw the ball well as well. So I just felt like every single thing that everyone was worried about, you just went up and said, yeah, I'm going to check that box, check that box, check that box, and we're going to win, and we're going to win going away.
Yeah, can I add, too, that it was impossible for Purdue to throw pretty much at all during the game tonight? In the first quarter, they attempted 0 passes, which is surprising to me, and you wonder why the Boilermakers name is being attached to a team that is too scared to even pass the ball in the first quarter. And, Buck, I think you mentioned how great Oregon's secondary looked and really just kind of shut down. I mean, I don't know if Brown couldn't even recognize like a zone versus a man coverage, but it just seemed like he was making all the wrong throws when he was throwing the ball tonight, but Purdue was just scared to even have him throw.
Well, I pointed it out to you, Schulte, towards the end of the game because, Purdue was down 5 touchdowns, and the only way they could move the ball was running it, and not like
so weird.
You're behind, so you think we want to throw the ball to try to get back in the game, and obviously the result has far been decided at this point. But the fact that the more efficient way to try to get back in it is taking time off the clock and running the ball, because the passing situation is so futile for your team at that point in time. And it speaks volumes, I think, of really everything, all 3 levels of the defense, the pressure, the help from the linebackers, and then what you're able to do on the back end.